Hello, welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
And I'm Millicent Walker. First, the headlines. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says EU not there yet regarding sixth package of sanctions for Russia, including potential ban on Russian oil imports.
U.S. Department of Justice to investigate police response to the Texas shooting a day after President Joe Biden visited Uvalde.
Plus, Palestinians protest against the Israeli flag march in Jerusalem.
Welcome to the program. The European Union has been struggling to agree to impose a sixth round of sanctions on Russia, including a ban on Russian oil imports. One senior official says the European Council is preparing to reach a political agreement on the issue.
EU leaders are currently meeting to discuss the ban on Russian oil imports, just as ambassadors have already been holding talks. Russia supplies 40% of the EU's natural gas and 27% of its oil imports, for which EU nations pay roughly 400 billion euros a year.
Well, reliance on these imports varies from country to country, with some, like Germany and the Netherlands, particularly heavy consumers of Russian oil and gas. In the meantime, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU is not there yet with regards to the new round of sanctions, including a potential ban on Russian oil imports. She was speaking to reporters earlier today, just as she arrived for the meetings with the EU ministers today, saying it's never been easy.
The EU requires the approval of all member states to introduce the sanctions, despite announcing them nearly a month ago. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says he expects the EU to reach a consensus on the ban on Russian oil, but did not give a time frame when it might happen. Mr. Scholz also announced that there will be a constitutional majority in the German parliament to create a special fund of 100 billion euros to better equip the Bundeswehr.
Meanwhile, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban says the EU's latest proposal for sanctions against Russia would include a ban on seaborne oil imports, which would be a good solution, he says, but there is still no compromise yet on the issue. Moving on, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says the Russian President Vladimir Putin will not achieve his objectives in the country. His forces invaded on February 24. The war in Ukraine and the applications by Finland and Sweden to join the defensive alliance that it has triggered are set to dominate a summit of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Madrid later on next month, which Sanchez himself will host.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said at the same event that the cold blast of conflict would overshadow the historic summit.
Well, just before we speak to Anna Chernikova, who's on standby, developments out of Ukraine at the moment. French President Emmanuel Macron has named the French journalist who was killed in Luhansk in eastern Ukraine just after the armored evacuation vehicle he was traveling in was hit by a Russian shell. The man has been identified as Frédéric Leclerc-Imhoff. He was just 32 years old. President Macron said he was shot while on board a humanitarian bus alongside civilians forced to flee to escape Russian bombs.
We are also learning today U.S. President Joe Biden saying the U.S. will not send Ukraine rocket systems that can reach into Russia. It comes after reports that the Biden administration had been considering sending advanced long-range rocket systems to Kyiv. Russia had said it saw any deliveries of heavy weapons as a provocative escalation.
Right, they did. Also, Russian forces are said to have entered into the city of Severodonetsk as efforts continue to capture the eastern Donbass region continue. Now, if they do take over the city, they would have completed their conquest of the Luhansk region, which is a major strategic aim for them.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about this some more. Anna Chernikova, VOA correspondent in Ukraine, Kyiv, actually joins us now. Anna, it's great to see you. And I know how difficult it must be to keep tabs with what is going on, and even more risky for foreign journalists covering the invasion. How does the Ukrainian press feel when they hear a foreign journalist has been killed? I mean, the last time we heard it was a Ukrainian journalist, Liberty Radio, and this is while covering the fighting that's going on in your country.
Good evening. Well, it's yet another tragedy, and of course, for everyone, it's a great tragedy, and especially when a person who is a foreigner, and it doesn't matter, it's a journalist, it's a doctor, it's a civilian, but of course, when a foreigner is dying on the territory of your country, well, it's even, you know, I mean, I don't want to say that it's even worse, but it's as great tragedy as if Ukrainian would die, and especially when we talk about the war and when we talk about journalists and doctors and civilians dying, I think that this is just well, it's just another, you know, war crime that is happening, and unfortunately, this brave French journalist, as you correctly said, we also have information that his name was Frederic Leclerc. He was covering pretty much civilian topic, evacuation of the civilians, and he was killed by the missile attack and by the piece of the shell on his way in Luhansk region.
Perhaps, you know, for those listening, talk to us about some of the care that you take covering some parts of Ukraine since the invasion. And, you know, this is also for others who are on the ground covering this invasion.
Well, I should say that in this war, we're pretty much covering the whole country. So it's no regions that haven't suffered from either shelling or or on land attack or anything like that. So for the moment, I think that it's just one region that haven't suffered from neither shelling or attack, which is Chernivtska region. But again, every day they also suffer air raid sirens and so on. So of course, it's it's just experience that you never ever expected to have, and in this case for Ukraine it takes the whole country. I should say that of course we all now concentrate on the east part, because eastern part of Ukraine is now the main battlefield, and Severodonetsk and Lysychansk are two cities in Luhansk region, which are under Ukrainian control, and where the main battle, the main fightings are happening right now. Also, the south is still very dangerous, and the south is still under very difficult fightings as well. If we look at the Odessa region or Mykolaiv region, every day we hear reports of shellings, we hear reports of people dying, civilians dying, and military dying. So I think that these two regions are the main to concentrate on. I should say that north center part of Ukraine and west part of Ukraine for the moment are less risky. However, if we talk about north part, it's always a great risk, because it's an area which has border with Russia, and every day we see certain movements of Russian forces, Russian troops, Russian equipment there. So this is if we talk about general map, this is how it is now in Ukraine.
And Anna, Ukraine is still needing more weapons to fight the Russian forces, especially as, you know, the Russian forces advance into the Donetsk region. We just learned they entered Severodonetsk today. The U.S. president says he will not be sending rocket systems. Is that included in President Zelenskys' weapons request?
We don't know which kind of weapons exactly President Biden was talking about, because as far as I know, and as far as what information that we have, that he didn't mention particular kind of weapons. So what he said that they would not probably, again, yet the decision is that they're not going to send anything that Ukraine might use to strike deep into Russian territory. As far as we know, Ukrainian officials announced that Ukraine asked U.S. to include in this support package missiles which could reach 70 kilometers and 200 kilometers distance. So for the moment, there is no reaction or official comment on that from the Ukrainian side. Might come a little bit later, and I think will come. But for the moment, we don't know exactly what Mr. Biden was talking about, so we don't know exactly if these are the weapons that Ukraine asked for. But again, this definitely, well, I think that we will understand that in a couple of hours or in a couple of days. So it should be a certain explanation or at least an official comment from the Ukrainian president or from the Ukrainian officials who take care of that. If we talk about the Severodonetsk region, as you correctly said, Ukrainian forces are trying to, they are keeping the front line. They are doing their best, but very heavy fightings are happening. And as we know from the morning, a big push by Russian forces have been made, and Russian forces have entered the city, and now there are street fightings are happening. What Ukrainian officials are saying and reporting on the situation, because the situation is changing very, very fast. What we know so far, the latest, is that there are no particular movement deeper in the city from Russian forces. So basically, it's even difficult to say exactly where is the front line. So the borders. So who controls what? And but what we know is that most of the city is still under Ukrainian control, and this is in general when we talk about Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, because these are two cities which are left under Ukrainian control in the Luhansk region.
Well, Kharkiv also came under attack last night, from Sunday night until this morning. President Volodymyr Zelensky was there yesterday, his first official trip outside of the Kyiv region. I don't know what impact that may have had, on the soldiers. He met them, he talked to them, he encouraged them and all of that. How would they? What impact do you think that could have, on the fight against Russia? And, should people see more of the president perhaps outside of, the internet perhaps?
Well, I think it's a really great sign, and especially, a very brave step by President Zelensky, definitely, that he came there. Well, first of all, it should be a sign of certain improvements at the frontier, at the front line in Kharkiv region. And as we were talking about these episodes last week, Ukrainian forces managed to push Russian forces to the border. And the group of soldiers who reached the border first, they actually made a video addressed to President Zelensky that saying that, Mr. President, we did it. We reached the border, and we pushed Russian forces away to the territory of Russian Federation. After that, President Zelensky made also a video to them, especially to them, thanking them for their incredible job done. And basically now he came to thank them personally. And I think this is really a very, it's a very nice gesture, and definitely very encouraging gesture. Also, this shows that for President Zelensky, he feels more or less safe in that area, meaning that despite shelling, despite this, despite close distance to Russian border, still President is sure that he can definitely go and he would be safe. Because this is, of course, very important in this situation that we are here in Ukraine for the moment. Also, this, I guess, shows that he is sure that Kyiv is under great defense, and he is okay to leave this, to leave capital for a certain period of time. So, I mean, probably he would try to do this more often. Of course, we cannot say, but definitely this makes people feel much more convenient, and well, it definitely calms down the society, especially over all of these reports of shellings and intensifying shellings in some areas. But again, as we can see, well, yeah, the city of Kharkiv, unfortunately, especially for the couple of days of the past days, was again under the attack. But still, most of the shellings are happening in the south and in Donetsk and Luhansk region. So, as also what we know that Kharkiv the city of Kharkiv is about to return the operation of metro stations to normal. So basically, the city is trying to get back to normal as much as it can.
And Anna, the EU is yet to agree on a sixth package of sanctions, round of sanctions against Russia. Do Ukrainians think the sanctions are working?
Sanctions definitely working. However, sanctions have long-term effect, and Ukrainians very thankful, and they definitely support all the sanctions. Well, it's this war at the diplomatic level, on the political level. Ukrainians definitely support that and thank our partners to that. But what I should mention here is that, of course, Ukrainian society as well as Ukrainian officials have, this hope that more we go into the sanctions. So now it's package number 6. Yeah, we don't know how many of them are yet to come, but of course it's a great wish and desire that these sanctions would include something that would affect Russian economy as much as it could, and very badly. And I'm talking, of course, about the area and the sector of Russian economy that brings most of the income, which is oil. And of course, oil and gas embargo is something that is very, well, it's a great wish of Ukrainian society. And of course, if we talk about sanctions, Ukrainians have hopes that this kind of things would start to appear, because long-term sanctions are fine. The thing is that Ukrainians really want some really crucial economic areas to be also included in the sanctions. So, of course, there are hopes that this would come in the 6th package, but, well, we'll see. At least what we hear from the representatives of the EU, that at least partly it would be fulfilled. So we'll see. But definitely this is the way to go.
And Anna, before we let you go, the grains at Odessa, what do we know about the latest? If they've been able to leave the Black Sea, what's happening, and then what Russia has said, and what the rest of the world, the stand on Russia on this?
Yeah, well, we don't have any information that they were able to leave. What we know is that President Erdogan is proposing a meeting by the Ukrainian Russian delegation, and the representatives of the UN in Istanbul. Probably this would be the main topic for the negotiations. We know that negotiations are ongoing, and we know that this is one of the crucial points of negotiation. So I should say that probably military equipment is number 1, and then the grains is number 2. So really there is a hope that at least these negotiations would move on to certain official stage and certain public stage, because for the moment we understand that the negotiations are ongoing, but again, there is no official comments on that or information about any kind of decisions or possible decisions, or at least possible proposals to be at the negotiation table. So hopefully these would move from this point zero. Well, we'll see today, as was reported, President Erdogan already had a telephone call with President Putin. I think that he's planning to talk to President Zelensky as well. So we'll see. We'll see how it's gonna proceed.
Anna, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. Do stay safe out there.
Thank you very much.
And just quickly before we go on this break, it's all speculation, not true. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, answering questions about President Vladimir Putin's health. There have been increased and unconfirmed media speculation that President Putin, who turned 70 this year, may be suffering from ill health, possibly cancer. British intelligence sources were quoted telling media outlets that Mr. Putin is seriously ill in the last week. However, rumors about the condition of the Russian leader, long known for his healthy lifestyle and love of sport, have surfaced periodically for years.
Mr. Lavrov repeated the Kremlin's widely discredited line that Russia is fighting a neo-Nazi regime when also asked about the country's special operation in Ukraine. I know some analysts will have different views on this particular intelligence report.
Indeed, I've heard the speculation about the Russian president being ill. We have coming up after the break. They may not have won the UEFA Champions League, but Liverpool players and coaches were given a hero's welcome all the same. Stay with us.
Welcome back to All the Stories. The U.S. Department of Justice says it will investigate the police response to last week's mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, which killed 19 children and 2 teachers. Public anger is growing after it emerged that officers waited in the hallway as children trapped with the shooter made desperate 911 calls.
Well, President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden were both in Uvalde on Sunday to meet with victims' families. They were also seen comforting a school's principal, Mandy Gutierrez, beside a carpet of floral tributes for the teachers and children, all of them under the age of 10, who lost their lives. The couple then attended a Catholic mass at the local Sacred Heart Church. Protesters outside the church shouted, "Do something," as the president walked out. He answered, "We will."
Announcing its critical incident review on Sunday, the U.S. Department of Justice said the goal was to provide an independent account of law enforcement actions and responses that day, and to identify lessons learned and best practices to help first responders prepare for and respond to active shooter events.
Mostly 9 and 10-year-olds.
Well, members of the Primera Iglesia Bautista Church in Uvalde, Texas, did gather on Sunday to pray for the victims, including 19 students and 2 teachers who died during the school shooting earlier in the week. 11-year-old Bella Barboza, a member of the congregation, sang in honor of her friend Ellie Garcia, who died during the massacre at Robb Elementary School.
The mass was held only a few hours before President Joe Biden attended service at another church in the city. Barboza took the opportunity to send a message to the nation's leader during her interview.
We're supposed to hear Barboza's interview, but joining us now is U.S. and International Affairs analyst Joanna LeBlanc. Joanna joins us from Washington. Joanna, great to see you. I know the nation has not healed yet. This is a really international story. People around the world are just shocked at what's happening in the United States. But it appears every week, though, there is a shooting in the U.S. How do you explain to viewers outside of the country that the United States is still safe?
I think that we definitely here in the U.S. have a significant problem when it comes to violence by the use of guns. However, I think there's a much greater issue that we're not discussing here, and that is domestic terrorism. In 2021, the Department of Homeland Security acknowledged that there is indeed an issue with domestic terrorism as it relates to white men committing these atrocities. So just like the United States has spent so much money to fight against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist organizations across the world, we need to put some of those same resources here at home to ensure that we protect our children and protect Americans.
Well, domestic terrorism, of course, is a big issue, and you don't hear that word being thrown around very often, especially with these mass shootings. People are getting radicalized online in the United States. While we're talking about gun control, and I'm glad you mentioned this, while we're talking about gun control, there is no mention about how to stop the radicalization going on in America.
Absolutely. I think that there definitely needs to be a ban on assault weapons, right? And recently Congress did introduce legislation to make it so illegal. Now the question is it going to pass the Senate? I believe that the House, there could be sufficient votes to get that legislation passed in the House, but the Senate, it will be a bit challenging because, as we know, the National Rifle Association has many of these politicians in their back pockets. So if you really want to change this issue that we have in America, you need to remove money from politics. And the NRA is incredibly powerful, influential, has the resources, has the means to ensure that no laws that are being passed in Congress and signed by the President of the United States could undermine their economic interest. So that we need to remove that from the equation. And also there's a conversation about mental illness, right? And I do believe there are some that mental illness has caused them, has led them to committing this crime. However, I think on a greater scale, I think it's a scapegoat that is being used by many of these criminals and terrorists to commit these heinous crimes against American children and the American people in general.
And also, President Biden's visit to Texas will not be the last. His former principal, President Obama, also made speeches, previous presidents as well. This is a nation that faces a perennial problem. Do you think that this time there will be a definite change, seeing as this is the worst mass shooting since Sandy Hook in 2012?
As I said earlier, we need to remove money from politics. In the year 2022, an incumbent who's running for Congress, you need at least $2 million to have a successful campaign. That is an incumbent, $2 million. Think about how much that money is. And a lot of these candidates, they need the finances. So here comes NRA and some of these powerful organizations making sure that they put them in office and also ensuring that their rights are protected. But also, we have to be mindful that here in America, it is illegal to drink under the age of 21, but yet I can go to Walmart and I can buy a weapon. It is ridiculous. The fact that you can have an assault weapon. Where are you going to war? Like, what is this about, right? So we need to ensure that we have laws that protect. Yes, the Second Amendment provides us with the right to bear arms, and it is a right that must not be infringed upon. But at the same token, we need to make sure that we have measures in place so that folks can do background checks, right? Certain guns should not be accessible to the mass population unless you are a police officer or a trained individual, right? So we need to ensure that all of those mechanisms are in place, but at the same time, protecting and defending our right to bear arms, which is the Second Amendment.
I think for countries that don't have that Second Amendment, they really try to understand why guns are actually so important to America. How do you explain this to them?
Guns are important because, again, it's a fundamental right that we have here in America. And one thing that I'm not for is I'm not for undermining the rights that has been provided to us by the United States Constitution. As I said earlier, there must be, however, measures in place to ensure that the majority of the people in this country are protected, like background check before you can have access to a weapon, like having being of a certain age, right? So again, these are fundamental human rights that we as Americans enjoy, and they should never be undermined nor infringed upon. But we must have measures in place to ensure that the majority of these people in this country are protected, and also address the issue of domestic terrorism, because I think that is a fundamental problem here. It is white nationalist domestic terrorists that are committing most of these atrocities here in America.
And America does appear to be colorblind when it comes to these things. And you know, you have children and you have families that are mourning at this time, Joanna. They're looking to the leader of the nation, Joe Biden, for some, not just comfort, but also action. And, he said he would yesterday. But he was also part of an administration, 2 administrations ago, where this was also a problem. President Obama made speeches, he also made visits, he also prayed, and then he had thoughts and prayers, and so on, and still nothing has changed. What could be an immediate comfort, for those victims' families in Uvalde at the moment?
I think the American people are just sick and tired of prayers and thoughtful messages. I think the American people want actions, and they want actions now by the president of the United States. So I think what's important now is for the president to hold a national summit acknowledging and highlighting the issue of domestic terrorists, right? And I think if he raise it at this level to the White House, I think there will be more actions taken by other organizations in America, and obviously his administration. But the administration must acknowledge that there is an issue and hold a national summit at the White House addressing this specific concern. There has been a lot of organizations, prominent organizations in America, calling for President Biden to do as such. And I pray that he takes heed, because the American people are sick and tired of these atrocities, these senseless deaths, these white men utilizing weapons to kill innocent people in this country. And again, these white men are nothing but thugs and terrorists.
Well, well put, Joanna. Just thinking, how safe people feel just walking into public spaces. I mean, a shooting happened at a supermarket the other weekend. And then, now it's a school, tomorrow it's somewhere else. It happens to be a shooting every weekend in America and almost every day. Do you feel safe? Do you feel that America is still safe enough?
I think definitely there are concerns, and myself, you can see people are concerned. Some people are even scared. But I do think that because in America you have about 320 320 shootings per day, and out of the 320 shootings, about 111 people are dead. One dead is too many, right? But when you look at the numbers, America has a population of roughly 335 million people. When you look at the numbers, yes, it is concerning, it is alarming. But I think that the United States has the resources, has the capacity, but do we have the willpower to change things, to make this better for Americans? And are we going to allow the National Rifle Association lead the conversation and get what it wants, and allow people in America to continue to die by gun violence each and every day? That's the question.
And Joanna, did you say 320 shootings in a day? Wow.
One really wonders what can happen, especially the stopgap measure in the meantime, while of course legislation takes their time and all the other necessary things. Do you think that schools should try to protect themselves in a sort of way? Do you think police should be in every school with guns? And
just to piggyback off what you're saying, one of the complaints I saw was that there was no security presence, on the school grounds when the shooter appeared. He came in through the back door and seemed to have come in unobstructed into the school.
Yeah, so let me, I think I misspoke earlier. It's 223 individuals that are dead per day by gun violence. So let me make that clear. But secondly, I think that you are correct. I think that a gun-free zone is a domestic terrorist's playground, right? Knowing that when I enter this establishment, nobody's armed, nobody can stop me. So that is somewhere that as an evil person, as a terrorist, that I will want to target. So I do think that there has to be a way to address this. And to be frank with you, I don't know the answers, right? Some have proposed that maybe we should arm our teachers. Is that the best approach? I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I do think that we do need to have security officers, police officers on school campus with guns who are trained to shoot and to kill these domestic terrorists when they come on campus to hurt our children, certainly.
With the issue of police violence as well, that might be hard to follow up on. Thanks again, Joanna, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
And the Archbishop of Canterbury will miss the Queen's Platinum Jubilee service this weekend because he has coronavirus and pneumonia. The disappointing announcement comes as London is being transformed for pomp and pageantry expected later this week as a monarch will mark 70 years on the throne.
Award-winning royal biographer Professor Chris Imafidon has been speaking with our London correspondent Joanna LeBlanc outside of a very damp Buckingham Palace about the significance of the occasion.
It's never happened before. It's never been dreamt of before. It's been a theoretical debate. So is it possible to hit the platinum? Platinum was just written there as a mathematical concept, not as a real life event. So it's once in a lifetime. It's never happened before. And it's not likely going to happen in another 100 years based on calculations of the age of Prince Charles, plus the age of William, which is literally 40 this year, and then the age of the son. So if you look at 3 generations, we're not anticipating anything like this again. Almost every single person loves the Queen, not just the institution, but the person and the individual behind the person. Because when you see her, you will even like her, not because of the fact that she's old, but because she's caring. She asks questions about you, she's human, and she really, really wants to find out how good everyone is feeling. And that's one thing that endears her to anyone that meets her personally. The most quoted saying of the Queen was a speech she delivered as a 21-year-old, guess where? In Africa. So when she sees an African, she relates to you. The first time she became queen, guess where? It was in Africa. So there are 2 significant things that has happened in her life that has defined her life. Because remember, she was not supposed to be queen. She was not born a queen. She's the most accidental queen that's ever sat on the throne. Because her father was supposed not to even be king. It's her uncle that was supposed to be king. And so she grew up knowing that she was never, ever going to touch the throne. So that has redefined everything she sees. So the arrogance that comes with people that have a sense of entitlement does not come. So she still says, by the grace of God. So her personality is really dominant when it comes to that. So that's something I will never, ever forget. If she sees you and you think you're a foreigner and you don't belong here, she will remind you that she married a foreigner. And the father of the next king happens to be a foreigner, once homeless. People knew the egg, others knew chicken. If you knew the Queen before any of these scandals, you know who she is. And you know what she can do and what she can't do. There are a few things that she's had the opportunity to be naughty. She's had the opportunity to be demanding. She's had the opportunity when she assumed the crown, the throne very early, literally in her early 20s, that she's completely shut those things out. So it's knowing her and really knowing the person. Once you know the person, you know that for Nigeria, she was the first head of state. As soon as the country gained independence, as a geopolitical entity, she was the first head of state. And she remained the ceremonial head of state for another 3 or so years. And she still has attachment to parts of the Commonwealth that, 1, communicates in English, 2, does everything that they're doing in English. The educational system is Anglo-Saxon. The culture, there are a lot of relics of the British culture that is still dominant today in everyday life in Nigeria. So you see that her relevance and the relevance of the British monarchy will be literally forever. It's in perpetuity.
It's all leading to the Platinum Jubilee weekend. Well, coming up on the program. He came all the way from London and finally, Kunle Adeoju comes home to Lagos after his 13,000 kilometers bike ride for charity. It's in a moment, to stay with us.
Welcome back to the program. The World Health Organization says it does not believe the monkeypox outbreak outside of Africa will lead to a pandemic. And more than 300 suspected and confirmed cases of monkeypox are usually mild illness that spreads through close contact, causing flu-like symptoms, and a distinctive rash have been reported in May, mostly in Europe.
Well, the WHO is considering whether the outbreak should be assessed as a potential public health emergency of international concern, or PHEIC. Such a declaration, as was done for COVID-19 and Ebola, would help accelerate research and funding to contain the disease. Asked whether this monkeypox outbreak has the potential to grow into a pandemic, Rosamund Lewis, technical lead for monkeypox from the WHO Health Emergencies Programme, had this to say.
So at the moment, we are not concerned of a global pandemic. However, we are, and that word would need to be defined in the context of an orthopox virus. We are concerned that individuals may acquire this infection through high-risk exposure if they don't have the information they need to protect themselves. And we are concerned that because the global population is not immune to orthopox viruses since the end of smallpox eradication, that the virus may attempt to exploit a niche and spread more easily between people. But we don't have the answers to this question yet. Existing properties are that it mutates much more slowly than, for example, RNA viruses. So there is not so much information right now on, we're just seeing the first few genomes being put up. We don't have a lot of information on what the genomes of the viruses being detected in this current multi-country outbreak are really telling us yet. That is already a discussion that is happening in circles of virologists working together and looking at these things.
Well, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have denounced the annual Israeli flag march organized by the Jewish settlers in the occupied city of East Jerusalem, with several protests taking place on Sunday. Hundreds of citizens, officials, and members of political movements participated in the events to express their outcries. Hamas also organized a sit-in protest in front of the house of the movement's leader, Ismail Haniyeh, interspersed with speeches by Hamas leaders, including Youssef al-Sharafi, who warned of the repercussions of the settlers' incursions into Jerusalem. At the same time, resistance factions in Gaza threatened to respond by escalating the situation in the area and confirmed their readiness to launch rockets and enter a new escalation with Israel if the Israeli settlers continue their incursions into the courtyards of the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque.
A Nigerian biker, Kunle Adeoju, has completed a 13,000-kilometre journey from London to Lagos, riding to raise funds to support the fight against polio in Africa. Ms. Adeoju left London on the 19th of April, his trip spanning across 13 countries. The 44-year-old was greeted to cheers from the crowd who gathered in anticipation of his arrival. On Sunday, the adventurer reached the border between Benin and Nigeria after he embarked on the trip to raise funds in support of the fight for the eradication of polio. The former Shell employee self-funded his trip with 19,000 euros in savings, hoping to raise up to 20 million naira for Rotary International. His London to Lagos mission may have ended, but he says he will soon be busy again, embarking on a new journey, riding from Lagos to Israel, and then through Asia, heading to the Tibetan plateau. He then wants to ride to Everest base camp and attempt to climb Mount Everest.
Things on his bucket list and then doing it all for charity.
He did say that in our interview with him earlier in the month.
Yes, he did. We're looking at Liverpool players and coaches being celebrating a successful trophy-laden season with an open-top bus parade. This all happened on Sunday. The likes of Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Jurgen Klopp were all in place to wave to hundreds of thousands of fans who lined the streets of the city. It was louder than this, I assure you. Flares and fireworks added colour and noise to the event, where the Liverpool side showed off the FA Cup and League Cup trophies they won this season.
Liverpool came very close, very close to winning an unprecedented quadruple, but fell at the final hurdle before both the Premier League and Champions League. Last week, Manchester City fought back to win 3-2 against Aston Villa and beat Liverpool to the English League title by 1 point on the last day of the season.
Well, on Saturday, though, Real Madrid also clinched a 1-0 victory over the Reds in the Champions League final in Paris, with a Vinicius Junior goal being the difference. Neither of those defeats could stop Liverpool celebrating a successful year with a bus parade, and their fans were adamant that there were more good times to come for their favourite team.
Just unbelievable experience for everyone in the city to experience. The little kids, the older people, it was just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And even though we didn't win, who says we haven't got the best fans in the world? Totally amazing experience. What a day we have had. Excellent. Unbelievable. Making memories with your kids. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Great experience.
Yeah, that's why it's happening. Yes.
The way she was talking, you'd almost think Liverpool was a country.
Indeed.
So patriotic.
We have more reactions on that story, especially the tear gassing at the soccer, and that's coming up at Sports at 6.
Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi.
I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good evening.